Welcome to the President's Forum podcast. I'm your host, Wesley Smith, and each episode we bring you in-depth conversations with higher education leaders, policy experts, and innovators committed to student-first best practices in shaping the future of higher education. Whether you're a campus leader, a policymaker, or an advocate for students, this is your go-to space for fresh insights and actionable ideas. Thanks for tuning in. Today I'm joined by David Schejbal. He's the president of Excelsior University. David and I will discuss the enduring value of degrees and how institutions like Excelsior are innovating to make higher education more affordable and more accessible. David, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you today.
Thanks, Wes. Good to be here.
I'm noticing you've got what looks like to be an early jump on the holiday season here. Where are you today?
I'm at home, and actually we are working remotely this entire week at Excelsior University. So I'm working remotely just like all of our staff.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to let your staff know, hey, it's fine to work remotely if you're going to be in a suit and tie in the office all week, and they're going to be like, what? Well, that doesn't seem quite right.
Right.
Leading by example. Got it.
Right.
We have a good conversation today. A couple of weeks ago, we had a conversation on this podcast with Sarah Weissman, and we talked about the rise of micro-credentials. And it was really fascinating to see what's happening in the micro-credential area. Today, we're going to kind of talk the mirror side of that, and we're going to talk the value of traditional degrees. So to get us kicked off, what do students need to know about degrees?
Well, I think first of all, they ought to read some of the data that's readily available about the value of the bachelor's degree, since that is really the coin of the realm in higher education. And the conversation, I think, nationally has drifted very far to looking at degrees as purely instrumental value to the next job and as job prep. And I think that is an unfortunate development. And the value of bachelor's degrees and the broader education that comes with a bachelor's degree prepares individuals for a lifelong process of additional learning, critical thinking, better communication. So the benefits are, and again, the data is widely available. The benefits are not just more money from jobs, and that is proven. And bachelor's degree holders make on average about $1 million more over a lifetime than high school graduates alone. But in addition to that, they live longer, they engage more in civic society, they have more educated kids. So there are a lot of ancillary benefits, social benefits, broad benefits to the entire American culture than just money in pocket.
You bring up an interesting point about lifelong learning. We hear that pretty regularly now, lifelong learning and the value of lifelong learning. As you're talking to consumers of higher education about the need to look into or to have a perspective that includes your entire career trajectory and maybe even beyond, what's the value of looking long term? Why do people talk about lifelong learning so much today?
Well, it's interesting because I've been in higher ed for a long time. And when I first started, lifelong learning was a euphemism for learning in retirement. It's something you do after you retire, right? Today,
Right.
It's a requirement for employment. Knowledge is changing extremely fast. Jobs and what it takes to maintain jobs is changing incredibly fast. And so people have to continue to relearn, and they have to have the propensity and the disposition to continue to relearn. And one of the benefits of a standard bachelor's education is that people get in the habit of learning, and they may not love the process, but they get to be pretty good at it. And so it's easy for them to pick up the next thing and the next thing and so on.
They're learning how to learn.
They're learning how to learn, and they're learning how to continue to learn without it feeling like a chore, right?
Right.
Picking up the paper on a daily basis, reading newsletters, doing a little research about a particular topic online, etc. That's all part of learning. But for most of us, it doesn't feel like learning. It feels like part of everyday life.
So Excelsior, at Excelsior, you've been working to improve degree accessibility. And one of the ways that you do that is by using open educational resources. Can you tell us a little bit about your strategy there? What's happening?
Well, we're very concerned about the cost of education for students. We haven't raised our tuition in 7 years now, and
Wow.
yeah, and so we want to keep education affordable. And one of the ways we know to do that is to reduce the cost of learning materials. We know that, especially in the sciences, for example, learning materials can be extremely expensive. And so we are trying whenever we can to use open educational resources so students can access learning materials without having to pay more for that process.
No, I love that. I mean, what student doesn't love that? And are you finding success in being able to use open educational resources, or are there still barriers for implementation on that?
There are still barriers. There are some disciplines that lend themselves better to it than others. Typical liberal arts disciplines, you can get pretty much anything you need in the open educational resource space. Whereas more technical disciplines, especially if the learning materials are constantly changing, say in computer science or AI or some of the hard sciences, it's harder to find good open education resources. And so in some cases, students still have to buy the materials.
That makes sense. You mentioned 7 years since a tuition increase. That's a long time, especially during a time where the rest of society has been enduring pretty substantial inflation costs.
Yeah.
Tell us, and I know I do know another thing that Excelsior is worried about is the education of our active duty servicemen and women.
Yeah.
And so you're functioning on a number that hasn't been adjusted for inflation for over 20 plus years. What are some other things that Excelsior is doing to ensure that degrees can remain affordable for everyday, people that are looking to upskill and who are interested in, this lifelong learning?
Well, so, part of affordability, of course, is not just in the cost of the credit hour from any given institution. It's also how much, how many credits you have to take at an institution if you already have taken credits elsewhere, right? So
Right.
our students, just like students at Western Governors and Southern New Hampshire and other similar schools, many of our students come to us with a lot of prior learning, with a lot of credit. They might have credit from other higher education institutions. They might have ACE credit. They might have military credit and so on. So being able to translate that credit from other providers towards an Excelsior degree is incredibly important. And so it's not just the cost of the credit hour, it's how much actual learning do you have to do. So you could charge a low sum for a credit hour, but if you say to the student, and you have to spend X years here and take 90 credits from us, well,
Right.
that's really expensive, as opposed to us being able to say to a student, all you really need is 15 to 20 or 25 credits, and you can get your degree.
I love that vision of affordability, and it's something that I think all of higher ed consumers ought to have that on their mind. And transferability is just such an incredible nut to crack in higher education. It's like, we need to get the Elon Musks of the world, when they get us to Mars, then they can turn around and try to crack the credit hour transferability. I don't know. I don't know how we're going to advance on that. But to your point, we have to solve transferability issues more efficiently, because at the end of the day, it decreases costs for consumers. and transferability stands in the way right now. And so I love your focus on that, and I think it needs to be called out in higher education.
I agree. And for traditional institutions, it becomes very challenging because faculty are often against transferability. I can tell you a personal story from an institution that I used to work at. The philosophy department refused to transfer any credit from any other institution. And I said, all of my degrees are in philosophy, mind you, so I actually know what I'm talking about. And I said to them, "Are you telling me that no other faculty in any philosophy department in the country can teach the same stuff?" "Oh yeah, we teach it. We're special. We teach it in a special way." Well, of course they didn't teach it in a special way, right?
Right.
So it's that kind of mindset that in many ways gives higher ed a bad name because it forces people to waste a tremendous amount of time, and along with that, a lot of resources.
Great call out. It's something that everybody should be aligned on. And I do think we can make some policy changes to make this happen, especially at the state level. States should be demanding that there's transferability within state systems.
Within state systems, absolutely. I think we need to be careful about having states demand, for instance, for private institutions to transfer credits. Right. So I would be more inclined to let the market decide, especially now with increased competition and fewer students. My sense is that this is going to get straightened out because of the market far more than any regulatory process.
Yeah, I like the idea of making it transparent to understand, hey, if you want to choose an institution that is pro-transfer, and is accepting more of your transferred credits and thus is much more affordable, this is what it looks like. So transparency on transferability seems to be a very, very important next step.
As part of total cost of education.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. This has been a very interesting conversation with regard to degrees and next step forward on making degrees affordable and within the reach of consumers. Is there anything else that you'd like to add with regard to Excelsior's work on making sure that students understand costs as they enroll and they can make good decisions on those costs?
I think you said it. Clarity in the process, total cost of education, those are really important. You know, the other thing that we haven't talked about, and I'll mention it very briefly, is that the learning process at many institutions can be very complicated. So students, not only do they not transfer all the credits that they should, but they also often waste credits along the way because they take stuff that doesn't really benefit them towards their goals. And right. So having very clear learning paths so students know exactly what courses they have to take, how long it's going to take, and how much it's going to cost, every institution ought to be doing that.
And helping consumers make the best decision with regard to how they spend their time and their energy when they're in the higher ed institution. Yes. Fantastic. Well, David, thanks for joining us today. Happy Thanksgiving, and enjoy time with your family. I think this we'll probably publish this early December, so people will see this in early December. But great conversation to get us started on the month of talking through higher education affordability within the President's Forum. Thanks.
Well, thanks, Wes. Thanks for having me.